Welcome to Unscripted, an IICRC video production. I'm Jeff Cross, the media director for ISSA. Today's episode is special. It's about spot and stain removal, but it's intense. You're going to enjoy kind of like an in-class experience on how to remove the toughest spots and stains, the chemistry involved, and the proper processes to get the job done right. So let's welcome our guest and get started. I'm pleased to welcome to the program Tom Cermak, an IICRC approved instructor. Tom, thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me here.
You've been teaching how long?
I have been an IICRC approved instructor for 7 years.
Although I've been teaching most of my life in various capacities as manager and trainer for several companies.
But you've been cleaning for about 10 years?
Cleaning? Oh, I've been cleaning for 47 years. My anniversary is August 25th. It'll be 47 years.
That's what I wanted to hear, the experience you have.
47 years of doing this and about 40 years in the field every day. Now, about 7 years ago, I started full-time teaching, so I don't go in the field very much anymore. Maybe 3-4 days a month when I'm out mentoring other people, helping, or I get an occasional customer that's been a long-term customer and they need a repair or something, and I'll go out and do that for them. But most of my time is in the classroom.
Your Honor, we accept Tom Cermak as the expert in stain removal.
Practice makes perfect. I've got a lot of practice. I'm pretty good, but I tell everybody I'm good, not God. There's always some things that will not come out. I've had some that I couldn't bleach out and re-dye successfully. So, 95 to 97% or so is what I tell people the success rate is, because I feel that's fair and honest. One thing I've learned in 47 years of doing this is always be extremely transparent and honest with your customers, because if you lie, it will come back and bite you in the derriere every time. And so just tell them the truth. Yes, this responded really well. No, this didn't respond well. Whenever they ask me if I can get a stain out, they say, oh, I heard you're really good. I heard this. Here's what I can tell you. I will address the spot and see how it responds to the process. But the customer owns that spot, not me. And I'm attempting being the key word, to remove that. So I'm not always going to be successful, and I try never to say yes or no, because when I say no, it isn't going to come out, and it does, it makes me look silly. And if I say yes, it is going to come out, and it doesn't, it makes me look stupid. And I don't like to appear either way. I don't. So I just say, let me address it, and we'll see how it responds. I have a very extensive spotting kit, and I've been doing this 47 years. And we go from there. And then when I'm doing it, I will actually bring the customer in and show them how it's responding to the process. And when I'm done and I do my walkthrough, I'll go through every area that was of concern. And I'll say, see, this responded really well, this responded. And if I run into one that didn't respond, and then I say, Mrs. Smith, everything responded well, except that one spot in Timmy's bedroom, it just didn't budge with everything I tried. That's saying that I tried a lot of things, because they want to hear that I didn't just try one product and walk away. And I'm not that kind of spotter. I try a plethora of different approaches when I run into something that's more difficult to remove.
Well, we'll just say it's Timmy's fault.
Well, accidents happen. They don't call them accidents because nobody planned on it, right?
Exactly. But on this program of Unscripted, Tom has volunteered to show how to remove 4 types of stains. Before we head over to the workstation, Tom, why don't you tell us about those 4 stains?
Okay, what I tried to do is choose things that we run into and sometimes that are very difficult to remove. So coffee is probably the single most common residentially and commercially. So I thought coffee was really important. Residentially, wine is a very common spill. Kool-Aid or beverages that have dyes in them that actually dye the carpet. That's very common. And the last one I chose was ink, like ballpoint ink, where the dog chews the ink pen. We get a lot of those calls, and we see a lot of people have extreme difficulty in removing ink because of the fact that many times as soon as you address it, it blossoms out. So you start with something the size of a pencil eraser diameter. And when you're done, you got a purple spot the size of a 50-cent piece or $1. And not only does the customer get very irate because they started with a small spot and they don't want to hear that it bloomed and it wasn't your fault. So that makes them very proud. And then it doesn't come out all the way. And that happened a lot in my early years. And I have several different techniques that I use to test the different types of inks and several different little tricks that I've learned over the years to keep it from blossoming.
Sounds good. So let's go to the other side of the room and take a look at what we're going to do. Well, Tom, I love the setup you have there. I think it's cheating though to do stain removal on a tabletop, but
It is, but it's the only way you're gonna see it well. The camera tripod won't get much closer. In fact, we're gonna have to move the tripod in so you can watch closely what I do.
before we do that, tell us what's all around you there.
Okay, well, first I have, like I said, 4 different types of spots. This is 6 coffee stains, 6 wine stains. These are oxidizer stains. These are organic stains. So we're gonna use an oxidizer to remove them, okay? Chemistry is very important. Here I have Kool-Aid, which as we know is a strong dye. Kool-Aid will dye concrete. You can paint a smiley face on your sidewalk with it and it'll be there next year. And this is on nylon carpet. I made it difficult where it really does a good job and I applied the product very heavily. The last one I have here is an ink and I'm going to show you what I do to prevent that blossoming or blooming. And I'm going to show you a couple different ways you might attempt removal depending on what you run into. Because sometimes you will try a process on ink and it won't work because it's either a water-based ink and you're trying a solvent, or it's a solvent-based ink and you're trying a water. So it just depends on the products you're using. I tell you to always isolate a few small fibers and test that area and see how it responds before you proceed, because if you just pour the product all over that stain, you may make it more difficult to remove. So always isolate a few fibers and test there first. And then once you're happy with the results, then you can go ahead and apply it to the entire stain. So that's the easiest way to do it. Now here I just put some small containers out in front of me, getting prepared for the class here so that I can show you different products, because one of the biggest problems we have with people doing this is they'll take a stain like this and they'll spray the entire piece. You don't need to. You really want to, for cost effectiveness, you really want to control the application, and especially when you're using oxidizers and reducers, they are both types of bleaches. That being the case, you want to contain the chemical, the product you're using, to the area that's affected. You don't need to treat way over here if there's no spot or stain there. You need to concentrate on the stained area. It also means you're going to use a lot less product, so it's going to be much more cost effective for you. And this is just a scraper, spatula. This one's a gum sharp. Any of them do. I use this for agitating the product in. When you agitate, you always want to agitate gently so you're not distorting the nap. And you always want to agitate your product from the outside in so that you're not spreading the product throughout the carpet. You want to work from the outside in, and as you work it, it gets smaller and smaller, and then it's gone. And the last thing I have is one of the most forgotten tools in our industry, I think, and this is a tamping brush. One of the biggest issues we have with spot and stain removal is as we're working on it, and I'm not teaching yet, so I don't have my gloves on, but we tend to do this and we agitate and we rub and we scrub trying to remove that. Problem is, when those fibers are wet and we do that, many times we distort the nap. And even if you have 100% success in removing that spot or stain, the nap distortion is going to be there forever. So most people don't know the simple trick of, once you've addressed this, agitated it, give it its dwell time, just put a white cotton towel. I like to use 2 layers of thickness. And then you get to do my Michael Jackson impersonation. Just beat it, and you will find that it transfers right to the towel, and I'll show you how that works. And you can completely remove it without distorting the nap. And the key is we want no color or texture change, so we can't distort the nap for the texture, and for color, we don't want to bleach it or do damage to the surrounding color of the stained area.
Well, I can now see where you're going to be working. So can those watching this video. So Tom, the stage is yours. Remove those stains.
Okay, well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is before you start using any of these products, you need to put on your gloves, because oxidizers and reducers or bleaches and many of these spotting chemicals are rather strong. Not horribly so, not dangerous per se, but not something I would want to get on my skin. But I always make sure to put on my gloves and protect myself. That's
Yeah,
just
because your technicians are out using this every day.
right. And I actually, most people don't carry the gloves in the spotting kit. In all my spotting kits, I have 2 bags with the gloves in them. And the reason I do that is because people tend to be lazy and they'll get all the way upstairs with the spotting kit and they won't have grabbed the gloves off the shelf, somewhere else in the back of the truck. And they'll say, well, it's only a spot or two. I'll do it without because we're lazy. We don't want to go back to the truck. And I understand that, but that is so dangerous and so wrong. So what I do is I put the bags of gloves in the spotting kit so there's no way they cannot have gloves. And the reason I put 2 bags in is so that by the time they run out of one and halfway through the second one, they'll remember to fill the first one again. So they'll always have a bag and a half or 2 bags of gloves on the truck so that they are protected. PPE is so important. And even in spot and stain removal, you really have to be cautious. I'm going to do 2 of these at a time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get 2 really dark ones so they're really, really noticeable. Can you see them well on the screen? And I'm going to use, I'm not going to use the same product on every one. I'm going to grab a few different ones here. We're going to grab this oxidizer and this oxidizer. So, and I'm not even going to put them on the screen. What I'm going to do is just put some in a cup. So
Yeah, I know there are many brands out there, many products. But what is an oxidizer? Tell us about that.
An oxidizer, very simply, it's a type of bleaching agent to begin with. And what an oxidizer does is it adds oxygen and actually alters the coffee or whatever you're working on and makes it so we do not see the color. It actually takes that color out of it. It takes the stain away. We look like we're miracle workers, but all we've actually done is alter the pigment in it so that now it's clear we don't see it. Now, during the process, we're also solubilizing whatever it is and tamping and drawing it out. So we are doing a removal as well. But the most important part, the part that makes us look like heroes, is just that we made those stains disappear. And that's a chemical process wherein we add an oxygen molecule, oxidize, and that takes the color out of the spot or stain.
Okay. Now, what do you have there? You said coffee?
Here's coffee, and I made 2 different ones because I want to show that even though different brands are out there, most of them are very similar in chemical composition. If it's an oxidizer, it's an oxidizer. It's going to be pretty close. Now, one of the things I want to point out right away is you see I'm using a pipette and I put it in a cup. Now, if you've got large areas, you may use a spray bottle, etc. If you've got small ones, you're going to want to use a pipette because you're going to want to contain that oxidizer. Now, what I do with coffee is I work from the outside in. You can actually see as I apply it. Oops, I need a little more here. You can actually see as I apply it, it's foaming a little bit, and the spot seems to be just disappearing almost immediately with the application. And that's a wonderful thing because that means I'm probably going to be very successful. Now I've
And
applied pretty much everywhere. So the next step would be for me to agitate. Now for agitation, the most important thing is no matter what you're working with, never to spread it out. So always work from the outside in. And you notice I'm not agitating aggressively. You've got to be very gentle. You don't want to get aggressive with these spots and distort that fiber. So there I've applied it. And usually we're going to let this sit for 2 to 3 minutes. Sometimes we'll let it sit for 5 minutes or more. Now here we saw an immediate chemical reaction. We saw an immediate lightening of the stained area. And that's wonderful. Sometimes it doesn't happen immediately. You need to have that dwell time to allow it to work. Now I applied it here and I'm going to add just a little bit more. There's a few spots there. Once I agitated, you can see a few spots that I didn't get any product.
Yeah, it looks good. So, Tom, if the customer already tried to remove the stain, does that affect it?
It does affect it. In fact, that's one of the reasons you might find that this coffee doesn't come out immediately. And that's what I was saying is sometimes you'll put it on and it does this. And you say, wow, that's great. That's wonderful. It's working great. Sometimes you'll apply it now and you'll put it on, and it may not make that big of a difference at all. Usually you'll see some difference, but it may not make that huge difference right away. This is because they probably used a household cleaning chemical or several sometimes, and it's actually going to be a barrier for you to change the pH and for the oxidizers to work correctly and work quickly. If they have not touched it at all, that's a wonderful thing, because then it's just my product. Sometimes when I come in, the first thing I have to do is clean and rinse the area before I apply anything, because they have several layers of chemical. And one of the ways you can see that is if you use a UV light for your urine inspection. A lot of the over-the-counter products have optical brighteners in them. So when you hit that coffee spot, the coffee spot doesn't glow, but if they've used optical brighteners, you may see rings around it where it glows, showing that that's been attempted. And sometimes the customer says, well, I didn't try anything but water. And you want to believe them, but then if you hit it with the UV light, you may see that optical brightener ring, and you know some over-the-counter chemical's been used. But perhaps it wasn't her who did it. Maybe it was the person who spilled the coffee. Maybe it was the maid. There are a lot of other explanations. So don't just dump to, yes, they did. Yes, someone attempted it, but it wasn't necessarily the person who told you it wasn't them. So here I've applied the oxidizer, and as you can see, made quite a big difference. Now I get to do my favorite Michael Jackson impersonation. I've agitated, I've let it dwell for a few minutes, and I'm just going to take and tamp, and I tamp pretty vigorously. And you can see the spot going through the towel. You can see the residue there. You can see it's made quite a difference already. And then I'm going to do it again. You want to remove as much of the product as possible, and tamping really works well at that without distorting the fiber. So there, as you can see, I'm getting a lot less transfer. It looks way better. Doesn't look perfect, but let's take a look at it and see what we've got. I'm just going to brush it with my handy broom and see what we've got. And I'll look at it and I'll say, oh, that looks really good. Maybe I missed the spot right at this corner here. See, I missed those two little spots there. So you may go over and critique yourself and reapply and readdress, or sometimes you'll do it and the whole thing is much lighter, but especially when it's been addressed by the homeowner, it doesn't take it all the way out. Well, again, once you see it didn't take it all out, you luckily removed the used oxidizer. It's chemically spent, the activity's been going on, so it's used some of its energy. So when you blot it out, you're removing that product, and then you can reapply fresh, strong product to it and do the same process a second time. That way, you can get 100% removal. Now, this one looks really good. So I would probably, though, still, I'm very picky. I see little teeny areas where I might readdress that. Now, when I'm to this area and I'm putting I need a very light overall coating, then I might actually take my spray bottle and mist over that area lightly so that I get every single piece, because I've already wetted the fibers, etc. Then I'm going to agitate from the outside in. Now here you see me flipping the spot. This is from teaching for too many years. In the real world, I would actually go like this and go like this and like this and like this, because I can't flip the carpet around in someone's room like that. So I would put that on, and again, give it a few minutes to dwell. Let that chemical do the work for you. Then after it's had that dwell time, take your damping brush, blot it again, and you should experience in most situations 100% removal. Now, this is sort of speed spotting 101, but you see it's almost looks perfect. We're going to see what transfer it got.
And Mrs. Customer, that will be $100.
Yes, typically, if you want to talk about pricing, I typically charge, I like to see $3 a minute. So if I see it's going to take me 15 minutes, I might charge $45 or $50. I base that on $180 to $200 an hour for specialty spotting. That's what I like to see in revenue. So now that looks fantastic. I'm going to bring it even closer.
Yep, perfect job, Tom.
On, it looks fantastic. Now I'm going to use a different product. So I'm gonna set that off the side. I'm gonna do one more copy, but I'm gonna use a different product because I want to show that it's not just one product dependent. As long as you're using something that's chemically made, and again, see how I'm starting from the outside? Okay, I'm putting the product on the outside first. Now this one looks a little bit different as I'm applying it. It's not quite.
And what chemical are you using now?
This is another oxidizer.
Okay.
Oh, I'm doing oxidized on both. I'm just doing two different brands because a lot of people say, well, Tom, well, what if I don't have XYZ brand that I saw you do in the video? That's why we're doing this video with no brands, so that you can see that it's not brand dependent. This is two different oxidizers, two totally different products. I applied it. And again, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I work from the outside in. And that's very important, not so much with coffee. Coffee is usually not one of the ones that spreads or blossoms, but for ink and ones that might blossom or bloom, it's very important that you start from the outside and work in. Now that one seems to have worked pretty well. I'm going to put a little bit more in the cup. I see a few little spots. I'm hypercritical, and that's one of the things you've got to be aware of is we tend to be hypercritical of our own work. And we'll see spots in little imperfections that our customer doesn't even see. So if I've gotten 90, 95%, and I see a few little areas that maybe could come up better, sometimes it's such minutia that it's not worth the time and energy. For me, because I'm really picky, it is. But you'd be surprised, many times we see these little teeny imperfections, and the customer walks in. Oh my goodness, Tom, that's amazing. I can't believe you got that entire thing out. That looks perfect. And I see one or two little minutia problems. I may go ahead and correct those anyway, just because it's me. I'll tell you honestly, I would definitely go ahead and correct it anyway. But once the customer says it looks fantastic, that's the goal, is the customer satisfaction, because they're the ones paying that $200 an hour for me to do my average spot and stain removal techniques. Now here I've applied it, I've agitated it in and out. And again, I see one little spot right there I didn't get. Can you guys see that little brown there? So for me, that would fail. I would have to reapply product there and then agitate it a little bit because I'm very, very meticulous. And I think when people are paying you a couple $100 an hour, that you can afford, you're making enough money, you can afford to put forth your best effort. So here I've covered it. I'm going to do the same stamping technique. These oxidizers tend to work very well. You can also accelerate them chemically. There are 1- and 2-part oxidizers. The 2 parts usually have an accelerant and the oxidizer itself. I also do on things like mustard and herb stains that are really difficult to do. Sometimes I will treat them, and then I will actually use an ultraviolet light to accelerate that chemical action. So here I'm just blotting and seeing how much I pulled out.
You are a perfectionist.
And that's one treatment. And you see I'm still pulling a little bit of color out, a little bit. It looks really good. I'm going to groom it real quick so I can get a real good look at it. And again, to me, that looks good, but I see imperfections. So I would grab the product I used at this point because I've removed all the gross contamination, a large percentage. Now I would take my spray bottle and lightly topically treat that area because the spray bottle gets a better overall dispersion. And then I'll take and agitate it in, give it that few minutes of dwell time and tamp it out. And I should have 100% removal. And my goal is always 100% removal. I don't like leaving little residues and traces, being less than 100%. If people are paying me because this bothers them so much that they're willing to pay me, then I need to really do a good job, put my best foot forward, do the best job I can, so that they can be happy and feel good about the money they spent. If you're not successful, oh my goodness, I spent $200. Oh, and it didn't help. Oh no. But if you're highly successful and everything is great, They're like, well, I may have spent $200, but look, now my carpet's like new again. I don't have to do anything. And they feel really good about their buying decision or hiring decision and hiring you to do that work. Now that's much better. See, there's no traces of color really, and that looks fantastic. So
It's
to
perfect.
me, 100%, that's great. Now I'm going to tell you the caveat. The one thing we haven't discussed yet is there is still oxidizer on that carpet. Even though I've blotted and removed most of it, there's still product there and it's still chemically active. So if there are any traces or remnants during the drying process where the chemical is still active, it's going to continue to do this. And because it's an oxidizer, these are both peroxide based. Peroxide evaporates completely and doesn't leave a residue. It turns to water and air. So when this is completely dry, they could ostensibly lick the carpet. Not that I would recommend that, but it would be safe to lay on or do whatever without any chemical burns whatsoever. And like I said, it's going to continue to work. So if there was a spot that I didn't even see in my pickiness, it's going to continue to work until it's done. So if you get 98%, 99%, and then you leave, that last vestige, that little 1 or 2%, is during the normal process going to take care of itself for you. So that's what I like about oxidizers. They're really nice. And I'm going to go from here on to wine. Wine is another organic stain.
Now, Tom, I now owe you $200.
Well, no, remember I said $3 a minute. We've only been at
Oh,
this for 15 minutes, so
okay.
you spent $45. Okay,
I
now,
like a bargain. Good job.
yeah, I'm very fair. I do it by the minute is how I try to figure my price. I may not tell a customer $3 a minute because I'm very confident in what it take, how long I'm going to take, and I'm very practiced. You know, practice makes perfect. The more you practice it, the better you get, and the more efficient you get. So because I'm really practiced at this, and I know like those two coffee spots would take me, let's say, 15 minutes. And I know I need $3 a minute is my target number, 3, 4, 5, whatever your number is. And I know that I take that 15 minutes and multiply times 3. I'm going to say it's $45. Okay, now, yes, you could be wrong. And you could take it 20 minutes or something. Could also take you 5 or 10. So I just try to get an idea of how long I think it's going to take to do this. And being practiced, I'm pretty good at figuring out how long it's going to take.
Mhm.
And then I say, Mrs. Smith, it's $45. Here, this was a pretty big wine spill if you counted them together, right? So, okay, that's pretty big. So yeah, I know that's going to take me 15, 20 minutes. So 45, 55, $60, you know, anything in there works for me. And if I'm lucky, it's going to come out in half the time. If I'm not lucky, I'm probably not going to exceed that 15 or 20 minutes because I always put in a little bit of fudge factor depending on the difficulty, etc. And remember, we've already looked at this with our UV light and done a thorough inspection, so we know it's been attempted before. If they've attempted it before, I add a few minutes to the time because I'm going to have to allow more dwell time and maybe address it instead of once and then twice for the final finish. I might need to do it 3 times. So that 15 or 20 minutes for that wine spot that big, if I see multiple shades of white with a bluish tint in those optical brighteners, I'm not going to say 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to say that's probably going to be a 30-minute discoloration. So that would be $100 if it was 30 minutes or $90 or whatever number you want to assign to it. And that's what I would base it on because I know if they've been messed with, they are usually more difficult to remove. And the biggest thing is they don't require stronger chemicals, but they require more dwell time and a very meticulous agitation. So they do need more agitation and more dwell time. It's just don't get aggressive in that agitation. Just do a more thorough job. So here I have 2 different oxidizers, again, same 2 as before. And I'm doing that just for consistency. What I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to draw a line down the middle here with this oxidizer, and I'm only going to do half of this one, just to show you how impressive it looks when you do this and how well it actually performs. Because you know what happens? It's just like when we call the customer in and we show them the line of demarcation, the clean side versus the dirty side. That's very astounding. It's, you know, it's very big. But if you don't pull them in until you're all done and have them look at it, they don't see the dramatic difference. It's not as noticeable because it's all clean now. So they have to rely on their memory as to how it looked beforehand. And that usually doesn't do justice to the quality of your work. So here I started here. And again, I'm going to work from the outside of the spot in. That is so important. And I know I repeat myself and people say, Tom, you're not going senile yet, are you? No, dedication and repetition breeds familiarity. The more you see it, the more you hear it, the more you think about it, the more
Exactly.
it becomes ingrained and it becomes just your standard operating procedures. So here I treated it, I agitated it, and I'll grab another clean towel. Now, again, typically we let about 5 minutes lapse in this dwell time, 3 to 5 minutes, depending on what you have. Now, if you see an immediate discoloration, it comes out and looks like brand new in 2 minutes, you probably don't need to give it any more time. Like we talked about earlier, sometimes we'll apply the product. I see a few little areas here. We'll apply the product and we don't see that drastic change that quickly. We don't see the drama. So we might have to let it have dwell time for 3 to 5 minutes. Now this seemed to respond very quickly, as you saw when I was applying the product. So I'm going to take the white cotton towel and I'm going to do my little camping action here. And this is probably the most underappreciated part of spotting and spot and stain removal is the painting. And I'm telling you, once you practice this a few times and you see how much better it works and all that agitating and distorting fibers, you should be a strong advocate. Now I've removed that. Now again, just like before, I said once I remove it and I think it looks great, I'll use the trigger sprayer so I get a more even application throughout than using the pipette. I'll agitate from the outside in on both sides again, just like I did before. Okay, I'll allow some dwell time. I don't need to here. I think that cleaned up really extremely well for one application, so I don't think we're going to pull much on this application, but we'll see in just a minute. A very slight trace right there that I didn't see, that wasn't visible. So but now you can see side A to side B. That's a pretty dramatic difference. And again, if there is a little teeny shade still there, that oxidizer is going to continue to work until it dries. So that little 2% that's left will be entirely gone before that dries. So that's wonderful how it worked. Now here's another really dark one. And you know what? Because we're doing side by side with 2 different products, I'll do the same thing. I'll just divide this one in half and show you how the response is. And if you watch again, I trace from the outside first, trying to make sure I cover everything on the outside and then work my way in.
Now, Tom, as you're doing this, I have a question. Some
Yes, sir.
watching might wonder, should we put the spotter on first or should we rinse the spot first?
Well, like I said earlier, if you notice that when you hit it with your ultraviolet light as an example, that it has that glow from optical brighteners, you know there's probably a bunch of soaps and detergents from one or perhaps more attempts. So you're always going to try to rinse it first.
So that's your recommendation. Look for those residues.
Right. If you see that, you know there's going to be a soapy residue. Some people actually take just distilled water, put it on, and agitate it and see if it foams. Usually with coffee and things like that, if they haven't addressed it, I don't find the need to rinse it. And my biggest problem with people rinsing it is when they rinse it, especially with their Super Sucker 5000 and they're using very hot water, they run the risk of setting, making the stain more difficult to remove. So you have to be
Makes
careful.
sense.
I use cool water, warm water. I won't bleed my line and heat it all up if I'm going to rinse. If I'm going to rinse, I'm going to start the machine while the lines are still cold and everything. I'm going to do my rinsing so that I don't actually make the stain more difficult to remove by heat setting it. And you can set it like that. Ask anybody who does laundry, you know, once they put it in the dryer, if it didn't come out, that heat has set that stain. And it's probably going to be what we would consider to be unremovable. So here I did the 1/2 and I've agitated it. Bring it side to side here.
I'm impressed that you're doing all this with just chemistry, which is an important point.
Well, our job is applied chemistry and applied physics. The physics, the tamping action is actually a physics action. The agitation is physics, but it's all chemistry and it's just knowing chemistry. And basically, there are a couple different ways that we remove spots or stains. One is to resolubilize it, to treat with something and make it liquid again, and then blot or extract it out. Now, those are usually spots, things that are on the surface of the fiber that can be removed with normal spotting procedures, sometimes just with pre-sprays and wands. Those are spots. Ones that are stains, coffees, because of the tannins, wines, they have natural organic pigments. Those are a little more difficult, so we jumped right to the oxidizers and reducers, which is usually just going to be easier for us to get that success. So I took that one out. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab that product because it's a different oxidizer. I'm going to spray the overall area. You notice I've done the same thing every time. I apply, I get all the gross contamination out and remove it. And once I get to that point, whether it takes 1 or 2 or 3 applications, it's not until I get it to where I say, boy, that looks pretty darn good. Then I do the overall spray to make sure that it catches any minutia that I might visually not see. I'm pretty good. I have pretty good visual acuity, but I'm good, not God again. So I just try to err on the side of caution and make sure that everything I do looks great. And there you can see it's just a wet, and here you can see
There
the
it is.
result. Now I do still see a slight shadow right here. Now, if I see that, I might lightly spray it again, but most of the time, if this is still wet, those oxidizers are still on the carpet and they're going to continue to work till it dries. So when you're practicing this, when you're doing this at home to get really proficient before you go out instead of practicing on your customer's carpet, let it dwell, let it sit, come back in an hour or two, or when the carpet is completely dry, and then assess it and say, wow, I saw a shadow in the middle of this one 2 hours ago. Now that shadow is gone. And the more confident and practiced you get at this, the easier it is, the faster it'll happen, and the more successful you will be. So there you just saw me remove wine and coffee. And again, I do see a shadow there. You may not see it on the camera, but I do. But I'm very confident that during the drying process, that oxidizer will continue to work and that will be gone by the time the carpet is dry.
Okay. Now, Tom, you talk about it being a peroxide base.
Yes.
So can I go down to the pharmacy and buy the brown jugs of
Well,
peroxide?
actually, if you were doing this on a wool carpet, I would probably suggest, Jeff, that you go there and buy that because it's a very mild peroxide. That's a 3% peroxide, and that will work, but you'll find that you'll have to apply it more times, do a little more dwell time, and that you can be successful with that 3%, but it's a lot harder. I buy products that are made for what I do. There are several different brands that sell peroxide-based spotters. They're called oxidizers, and they'll tell you usually right on the label for removal of organic stains, because oxidizers add oxygen and they work in the removal of organic pigments. So, I have the answer. If it's organic, I'm going to use an oxidizer. Now, what if it's not organic? Well, Kool-Aid is definitely not an organic stain. It is a synthetic dye. Now I'm going to move these up.
As you do that, you mentioned this earlier, but could you explain, because people don't probably drink as much Kool-Aid as they used to, what other beverages could this be, or food products?
Well, you'd be surprised how many of the beverages we have acid, their acid side. They have citric acid or some other acids in the nature that usually gives it a tangy or tart taste, especially things like orange. They have a lot of acids in it to give it that tartness of the orange. But many foods, even spaghettis, some of them are wholly organic, some of them are not. They might add an enriching color. They may add more red to it to make it look more aesthetically pleasing. And that's a problem we run into a lot. They add dyes to make things look good. Dyes aren't necessarily good for us, but they make it aesthetically pleasing. Kool-Aid, like I said earlier, will dye concrete. Now I'm going to take this Kool-Aid stain and I'm going to do half of it like we did on the coffee stain. Again, working from the outside in and trying to only put the product on the affected fibers. I'm not trying to put the product over the entire piece because I don't need to. I want to keep the chemical activity to the area where the problem is. And I apply this, and you can see I went from the center up. And then I'm just going to set this aside and grab my agitation tool. And again, work from the outside in. It is so important that you work from the outside in and that you're gentle. Notice how gently I'm agitating. I'm not, let me grab a piece just to illustrate. I'm not going like this. That just, well, boy, does that distort the nap. Okay. I'm doing it gently, and gentle is the key to not distorting the nap. And you don't need that. This is a chemical process. And yes, it is physics too when we do the tamping or agitation. There is some physics, but most of this is just a chemical process. We apply this as a reducer because it's a synthetic dye. We use oxidizers on organics. On synthetic dyes, we use reducers. They both work to take the stain and make it clear so we don't see it. It's visually imperceptible. Oxidizers add oxygen to do it because that's what works on an organic pigment. Reducers actually take away oxygen to render it clear on synthetic dyes. So either way, we're altering the dye sites to make it clear. It's just the type of pigment or dye. If it's organic, it usually responds to oxidizers, whereas synthetic dyes don't respond as well to oxidizers. They respond to reducers. So that's why in our spotting kit, we'll have both. Now I've applied this, and I have to say, I have just applied it, and you can already see a significant color difference. And many times we find that we can actually, if we have the right process, we could, as an example, if I was doing 4 rooms and the last room on the way out was a living room, they had a big Kool-Aid stain, I could apply my Kool-Aid stain remover, my reducing agent, to that stain. And sometimes I can just allow a dwell time. This is only 2 or 3 minutes, and a lot of that stain has disappeared before our eyes. And this is actually Kool-Aid. I made these samples last year, and it says use 1 packet to 2 quarts of Kool-Aid. I used 1 packet and made 1 quart. I actually made it stronger because I try to make the spotting that we do more difficult in the classroom than the real world, because many times in the real world, they're not just dealing with that staining agent, they're dealing with where the people have attempted to remove it previously, which makes it harder to remove in many instances. So I try to recreate as close to what I can in the field for the student so that when they do this, they can get the same kind of results out in the field. So I applied it, and we're going to blot it and see what happens. Now I had probably 2 or 3 minutes worth of dwell time. I'm not running the stopwatch. You can see definitely the transfer where it is reduction leaves the yellow residue. Used to be in the old days, we used hot iron transfer, and the towel would actually turn red. We'd be transferring the dye out. Problem is, many times we also transferred out some of the carpet color. Now here, it didn't get 100% yet, but you can see there's a definitive change, okay? So we would reapply. Now blotting it again, remove that old chemical, which had already done a bunch of work, so it was weaker because the chemical activity could be close to spent. So I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to do the exact thing, just reapply the product. Then I'm going to agitate, and then I'm going to do it. And this is one example of me not using any heat or acceleration to do this. Just applying the chemical, allowing it to work, agitating it, giving it dwell time. And we're going to come back to this one in a few minutes. Now I'm going to take the same product and I want to do something different with it. So I'm going to leave that one sit there under camera where you see there's no tomfoolery here. I'm not tricking you. Okay. And now I'm going to do the next one. And I'm going to do this one. I'm going to treat the whole thing. And you're going to see some chemical, some discolor, some change in the color, but it's not going to be all the way gone really quickly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to then use heat to accelerate. Again, start from the outside, working in, always, always so important, outside in. And get that product on there, agitate it, and I'm gonna say, okay, we're in a big hurry, we're only here for this one spot, we're not cleaning the whole house, we're not doing all that. So that being the case, I probably wouldn't want to invest as much time to allow dwell time to do it for me. Again, if I was doing 3 or 4 rooms, I can apply the product and let it work for me while I'm doing other things. It's good time management. You know, many times it's just the order of process or the systems and procedures you use that allow you to be effective and successful. And dwell time is a great thing with these products, and it's often overlooked. We get in a hurry and we forget about it. But if we're going to be there for an hour, do we really need to pull out that steamer to be successful in removing that Kool-Aid? We could. I'm not saying you can't do that, and I'm not saying it won't work wonderfully. What I'm saying is many times you don't even need to go that far if you plan your process so that it has the appropriate dwell time. So here you can see it made a big difference, but it did not remove it. Now here I have a steamer. This is my steamer. It's nothing special, it's just mine. I just push the button and there we have heat. Now be very careful. In a home, you know, you're doing wall-to-wall carpet, you don't have to hold the carpet to keep it from moving. Here, I got to hold it to keep it from moving. So I apply the heat and I slowly draw it across the carpet. Now, what the heat does is it accelerates the chemical activity. So instead of waiting and allowing dwell time, I'm pushing its button. I'm making it go really fast. I'm making that chemical way more effective and heating it up. Now, I'd like to make sure whenever I'm doing this that I'm going from all 4 directions. Here again, you see me spinning the sample because it's the easiest way on the camera. But in the real world, I would just move myself around the stain and remove it. And that quickly, I've made some significant improvement. And again, not every process gets 100% first time application. So what you're going to do is the same tamping action to remove any chemical or moisture that's there. Wow, look at that go, okay?
Impressive.
Wow. And there you go. That's really close. Now, again, just like I did before, now that I say, wow, that looks really good, I would do the same thing, just a light misting over the area. And I do see some areas that I missed where I didn't get a little spot or it didn't quite remove. But that light general mist that covers everything and gets really good penetration, that's what I'm after. And again, always imperative that you agitate it. And again, from all directions so that you're getting all sides of that yarn. I have seen where people have done a carpet where the nap was laying down and they addressed the spot great and it looked gone when they were done. But then when people walked on it and it moved the carpet around, you could see little teeny flecks or specks. So that to me is a fail. So you want to make sure you apply it well. And the reason I use the pipette is to get more in a confined area, and then the spray is to get a nice even dispersion over a larger area. Now I applied that. Again, you could leave 5 minutes of dwell time, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to make it go away. So here, now we used to use steam irons and white cotton towels, and many people still do. You have to wash the towel in between applications, rinse it out kind of thing, and you have to have those towels, and it can be a pain in the derriere. I don't like them because when you do that, typically you're covering the stain for 30 to 60 seconds with the steam iron. Here, let me grab this and turn that off real quick. Typically with the steam iron, you would put your white cotton towel in there, or damp towel, not wet, but damp, and you would have put your iron on, and you're waiting 30 to 60 seconds before you start peeking to see how it's done. Well, my problem is in that 30 to 60 seconds, I could actually go too far and actually remove a little bit of carpet color. So I don't like this, and I don't like messing with all the towels. So for me, I prefer these steamers because they're very fast. You saw how quickly that happened. I was able to remove it fast and turn the steamer on. Get it hot, takes about 45 seconds, and then total removal. And wow, that's pretty darn good. So we started with that, and we went to that. That's pretty darn impressive for just a couple of minutes.
It's
So
very impressive.
for me, that removal is really important. Now here we've only allowed dwell time. Still getting some transfer, but much less yellow than the other areas, right? So it's not doing much more. It doesn't seem like it's 100% at all. That to me, because of all this, would be a fail. However, now that I've removed this much with no effort whatsoever, applied it, walked away and went and cleaned another room or vacuumed a couple rooms or whatever, now I could take that same product, treat it with that spray like I do, okay, agitate it again, outside in, etc. Give it a few minutes of dwell time, and then hit it with that steam. And this is what we see a lot of times where they've addressed it before. You know, they tried removing it, their mother-in-law tried, their son tried, whoever made the spot tried, and they were unsuccessful. Many times we'll do all this and we'll be left with this tint. When you have that tint, the key is to treat it and allow at least 5 minutes dwell time so the chemical can really get in there. Okay, and then heat and accelerate it, because just getting it dwell time wasn't chemically exciting enough, wasn't getting the response you wanted. So for me, at that point, I would say, you know, the next step is it came out really a lot better than you would expect for something that's such a strong dye, but it did not come out perfectly. So now, again, just turn down the steamer, and I'm gonna very slowly, now, the thing is 2 to 3 seconds as I'm going across this, I can see the color change. There's almost no risk of overdoing it and bleaching the carpet, because the color change happens very quickly, and I can see as soon as I move the tool away if there's a problem. Oh, that looks like it's starting to get too light. Stop now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there, just heating it up. You notice how fast that was. Almost no yellow,
Yep.
and the removal's much, much better that quickly. And again, when you get into the really difficult ones where they've thrown everything under the kitchen sink at it, you may actually treat this with the product and agitate and allow dwell time and even steam 2 or 3 times before you get 100% success. So this is why I look at it with the UV light to see if it's got that glow, and I know they've used products on it, then I know it's going to take a little longer for me to be 100% successful. So I'm going to add on a couple minutes to my charge to allow that extra dwell time and that extra application and heat. But as you see, the heat acceleration itself is only 10, 15, 20 seconds. The worst part of it is when you're allowing dwell time, the twiddle your thumb time. I actually have little timers that I take on my job site, because I'm such an impatient person that I'll put it on and in 3 minutes I'll be readdressing it because it's not gone yet. So I have these little kitchen timers I use, and I set it for 5 minutes. When it beeps, I'm not allowed to touch that sample till it beeps. That's how I discipline myself, because I get in a hurry. You know, I always want to do it quickly, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I do. And those are some very simple Kool-Aid stain removal techniques. I've never had great success with the old dye removers without doing color damage. With these, I don't normally have to do. In the old ones, we would take a white flip top bottle and we would put a bead of water. Hold on. I know I have one here.
As you do that, Tom, I recall those days, and I did not like stain removal as much as I do now.
Yeah, the products have gotten so
So much
much
better.
better that it's so much simpler now. In the old days, I would take a flip top bottle. Now, this is just one of my distilled water bottles. I use distilled water for everything. And remember, if you're using any kind of steamer, steam iron, or anything, always use distilled water. Now, I'm just going to give you an example. And here I'm going to use ink, because we're going to talk about ink next. In the old days for Kool-Aid, we would do the same thing. We would put this, what we call a dam or a ring of water around it. And I'm going to show you why I'm going to put the dam on this and everything too. So I just take the flip top bottle and I agitate as I'm doing it. And I try to not get any water on the ink, but get a good little area, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch around that area wet. And the reason I do that is when I apply my products, if the fibers around the stain or discoloration are wet, they tend not to spread out. If I don't contain them, they're more likely to spread out. So let's see, I'm gonna look for one that's close to the same size in it. That was a little bigger. Yeah, this one looks closest, I guess. So if I didn't do that, now I'm gonna take an ink remover without damming it. We're gonna see what happens here. Now I put the ink remover in a flip top bottle just so we could do it. This is not my distilled water bottle. I just put it in here for this test. Now, when I apply this is a water-based ink remover. So I do apply it directly to the carpet. If it was a solvent-based ink remover, I would apply it to my towel first and then apply it to the carpet. You know, I treated this one and this one I put a dam around, this one I did not. Now, I've been telling you all the time, agitate from the outside in, right? Well, the reason is if you agitate from the inside out, you might spread that stain. See what I mean? So that could be a problem. That's crazy.
I'm sorry, I fainted.
And so that would be a fail, right? I
Yes.
mean, yeah, we can get it out, but it'd be a lot of work.
How much do you charge for that, Tom?
I gotta call my insurance agent. I'll let you know what he charges me. So here, that's what happened, and that's why it's bad. Now here, let me make sure that dam is really good. Again, this one says distilled water. I want you to know I'm not using the same product all the way around it. So here I'm just using water as that dam. You can see all the fibers are saturated. I actually sometimes will actually even go like this to make sure it's soaked in well. Now I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna apply this product on the top. But, you know, it's watery running a little bit there. I did not expect that, but sometimes that happens. Now, this product works so well at breaking up that I'm really worried about it staying in those areas. But because I got that fabric wet on the outside, that spread, but it's not penetrating because the fabric is already wet. So when I do my toweling and my blotting, what happens is that stuff is on top of the water. It should, if I'm right, come out really easily and not be spreading that stain everywhere. Now, I will tell you, when you're doing ink, you will ruin your towels. And that's one thing that does happen. Ink tends to be really bad on your towels. So I actually have several different layers of towels. I have A, B, and C. A is my upholstery cleaning towels. They are pristine, bright white, and have no blemishes. B are my spotting towels where they can't have blemishes, but they've been washed. And C is the ones that are no longer acceptable to take out in public, that I use them in the shop to clean up equipment, or, you know, take a spot, a stain or some grease or oil, or my car did, or my truck did, or whatever. I use it only for taking spots and stains out. That I'm going to throw the towel away this time. So here, as you can see, it didn't spread out. It stayed within that contained area where the dam was. And what I'm doing before I reapply product is I want to get that dam back in place, because when I blotted it, I also took the water off of that, right? So you need to reapply that dam. And then I'm going to apply my product. Now, the first time I didn't even agitate much. Now that I've gotten the gross contamination, the real heavy stuff out, I'm going to start doing a little bit of agitation. Now, ink is probably one of the most difficult. Ink and mustard, curry, turmeric stains are the ones that students that I hear the most about and that I get the most calls about. Now, see, that ink still spread, but it stayed relatively contained into that dam area.
There's some transfer.
Yeah, a whole lot of transfer. But that's great. I want that transfer. Once I get to the point that I'm at 80 or 90%, that I'm only working on minutia, again, I'm going to allow more dwell time. I'm going to be a little more delicate. But here I was trying to remove that gross contamination first, the heavy stuff. And it worked pretty well. I'm going to groom this up and show you exactly what you would see in the real world. In the real world, you would say, okay, there's still some there. Now I'm not worried about it spreading so much, but again, even though I'm not too worried about it, I'm still going to create that dam. Now the fabric's all wetted out, so it's absorbing real easily the water now. Then I would take that same ink remover and do the same thing, apply it, agitate, and I'm going to give it a little more dwell this time because I've been doing it very quickly to get the gross contamination, the heavy stuff out. But now I know that I'm down to more minutia. It's more the stuff that's really embedded in the fibers. So I'm going to do a much more careful agitation. Again, not being aggressive. But what I'm doing is I'm looking like right here where I see that dark blue spot. I need to make sure that that's agitated well into the product. So I'm being much more careful about what I'm agitating and how I'm agitating, trying to make sure that if I miss the spot like right here, that I apply some product and I get that. Because now I'm down to, it's a lot different stain than it was before. We're down to just that minutia. But I want to make sure that I agitate that. And then I'll just give it a few minutes of dwell time before I blot so that it can actually continue to work at breaking up the really hard stuff to get out, because we did the gross, the heavy stuff that was on top that was pretty easily and readily removed and transferred out really well and easily. Now we're into the more difficult part where it's penetrated further into the dye sites or into the fiber itself, whether it has dye sites or not. It's penetrated further, it's got a better attachment. And sometimes that's even the van der Waals principle. The smaller the particle, the greater the magnetic-like attraction to the fiber. Some of the beads, the chemistry behind some of these inks is so good that they use very, very small particles for the pigment, and those tend to penetrate further and have that magnetic-like attraction. They're a little more difficult to get out. So again, you can see even just doing that, it does look much better. But you're going to want to give that a full 5 minutes or so dwell time now. You remove the gross contamination, now you're down to the stuff that's stuck, the more difficult stuff. It's going to take a little time. And remember, since this is showing, I want to remind you, remember, when you do this, never move from one area to another without checking or brush, because if I went from this to a red lipstick stain, I might turn it purple because red and blue make purple, right? So I don't want to do that, and I don't want to transfer this ink onto an unaffected area. So you may have to go out to your truck and clean your brush out before you use it again if you don't have a second one. Now I have several tamping brushes here because we just had a class here. We just had an upholstery class yesterday and the day before, and we had carpet and odor last week. So I've had a lot of classes here, so I didn't take everything home just because I knew that you were going to have me talk to you about spot and stain removal. And I thought demonstrating how I do this and what we get away with and how it works is a great way to do it. And I really appreciate the opportunity to show a large number of people that patience and how you do it really makes a big difference. Now I'm going to get rid of this one again. Make sure you only wash these towels together, and usually this is not going to come out all the way, so it's going to go into my spotting towels, and then it'll be a grease towel that gets thrown away when that's done. And here's a great example of that. See the yellow discolorations and the pink discolorations? This is a towel that's been downgraded to a spotting towel because I can't use that on someone's upholstery, even though I know it's been washed and it's not going to transfer off. Mrs. Smith sees me using something like this and she, oh my goodness, your towel's dirtier than my sofa. So you never do that. That's why I always have a separate one for separate towels that have minor blemishes for spotting and pristine ones for using in the customer's upholstery. So the biggest problem for me again is waiting. Now I tell you to wait 5 minutes and I want to tamp that spot so bad. It's like, I got ants going because I want to see how quickly I can remove it. But it's still pretty blue in areas. So I need to let it sit for a few minutes and be patient. And that's the hardest part for me. And that's why I set my timer. So if you've got a timer, most phones have a stopwatch. Set that stopwatch and force yourself to give it that whole 5 minutes because it is a chemical process and it takes time for that to work. And we're not trying to remove the gross contamination off the top now. We're trying to get deep down in there. So we have to allow that product to do its job. We go too fast, we're shortcutting, and we're probably not going to get that 100% I'm after. Ink is one of the ones that sometimes I'll have to do this 2 or 3 times before I get it out. Now, sometimes it's great, it comes out right away, it's really easy, and sometimes it's not. This is one of the more difficult inks, but it's the only samples I had left with ink. And you can see I'm pulling more and more transfer out. It's looking much better than it did originally. Now I want to make sure that I'm blotting it really well because I'm going to try another attempt because it's not 100%, but I want to get as much of the chemical that's already been active and has spent some of its energy or chemical activity out of the fiber, because just like the dam, if it's wet, it keeps things from penetrating in. If the fiber is wet, it keeps my spotting chemical or my stain removal process from penetrating in as well. So I'm going to do one more sample before I reapply product. I want to get it as dry as possible. I'm getting practically nothing. And here's where we're at. I'll stand it up first. Let me just grab a handy groomer. This is the easiest way to stand it up and see what it looks like back in the real world. And we take that and we compare it to that, or we take it and compare it to one of the others that was about the same size. And you can see that's a huge improvement. But ink being one of the hard ones, and also when people have spots that have been addressed several times by the homeowner, those are harder. You may have to apply and attempt 2 or 3 times to get that removal. Now, again, I'm just going to put a dam around it to keep it from spreading, although I don't think there's much of a risk at this point of anything spreading because there's so little there, but there's still definitely discoloration there. So now I need to apply that product and again, get very close and really look at, like right there where that really dark piece is. I want to make sure that I agitate the area really well. Now I don't need to agitate all here because that all came out, but right in the worst area where the deepest, darkest penetration is, if you look at these, the outside areas came out really well, but the deepest, darkest penetration on these many times goes way into the backing of the carpet. And sometimes it sticks on the backing and it's difficult. Sometimes it'll actually be right on the tips. Some of the blue on this one is right on the tips of the yarns. It just penetrated so well that that's what we've got. I see 1 or 2 spots that I might have missed. Okay.
Hey, Tom,
so
you know what I've noticed?
What's that?
You're really working this.
Well, ink, again, remember what I said about practice?
Yep.
If you know it's ink, you know ink doesn't come out as easily. Kool-Aid used to be like this. Many other spots used to be like this, but the chemistry is so much better. It's not. Ink, this is one of the worst ones, and there's several different types of ink. Unfortunately, this just happens to be one of the more difficult inks. I have blue inks, black inks. This is one of the most difficult ones, but it's the samples I have left. I need to make more. I actually make hundreds of these at a time. I also make hundreds of bleach spotted carpets at a time for the dye class, for practice before we get into actually dyeing the test samples, so that they can actually get an idea of how the process works before they get graded on it. So I take these, and these are one of the most difficult ones. The students who do really well in the spotting are going really fast through it. I'll throw 1 or 2 of these inks at them, and it slows them down a little bit. It's a little bit of a curveball, but it's great. So again, let that 5 minutes of dwell time happen. You need that. We're down to very little transfer, very little anything. So you're going to have to give it that dwell time to continue to get more out. Now, I've had ink spots that no matter what I did, I could never get 100%. I've had ink spots that came out very readily and very easily. So there's a huge variance. So when I see ink, I say, Mrs. Smith, let me do a few tests, and I will test it. I will isolate a few spots, and I'm going to show you that while this is dwelling. When I talk about isolating fibers, I will take like this sample here, and I will isolate a few fibers, and either very carefully with a towel, or many times I will use Q-tips to address those areas to test and see how the spot removal works. Well, actually, since I'm mentioning that, I'll grab the Q-tips right now and show you what I mean. I'm gonna have to take my gloves off and I'll put new ones on. Okay, because a new pack of Q-tips and I can't get in without getting my fingernail underneath these. There we go. So what I'll do is I'll take whatever spotting chemical that I'm going to use, and I have several different ink removers, and I'll grab another one or two while we're at it, in fact, so I can demonstrate that for you. So I take different ink removers and I'll just put a little bit in my cup. This is just so I can control the application. This particular brand doesn't have a flip top bottle. Doesn't matter, I'm just saying, so that's why I poured it in. Then I'll put it on the Q-tip and I'll of course try to push off or squeeze to the side so that the Q-tip isn't dripping. Okay, and then I've isolated these fibers right here. Everything else I moved away from those fibers, and I'll address it and see if I get transfer and how much transfer I get and how easily it transfers. Obviously, that product is breaking up and transferring the ink out pretty well. I could try another product if I wasn't sure, and I'll try a different one here. Same thing, I'm going to use a Q-tip, I'm going to get it wet, and then I'm going to push it to the side and push on the side as I'm doing it. I don't want my Q-tip dripping. I want it to be just wet because I want to be able to apply it to just a few fibers, not the entire surrounding area, and see how it works. So I isolate a few fibers again, and I'll do the same thing. I'll address them. I like to brush them a little bit and then let the product sit on it. I'll address it and see how much transfer I got. Now that one didn't give me near as much transfer. Okay, so I might be concerned that, and that's the one we just used on that ink spot. So that one doesn't seem to be working really well. I didn't try it ahead of time. I just went on and used that particular ink remover. So what we're going to do on this one is we're going to try the ink remover that made it move really quickly. I'll put a little bit more in there actually, just so we can use it with the pipette, and we'll ring it and we'll see how it works. That may be a much better transfer of color. So this is where these Q-tips, you think, oh, I don't want to spend all that time. But boy, sometimes you'll try it and it won't move at all. You try it with something else and it moves great. Well, hey, I want to use the one that moves easily from. Now, again, I'm just putting water here, so I'm only tapping on water. Don't panic. I'll put my gloves on as soon as I finish this ring real quick. Okay, but I'm going to put that ring around. Remember, that ring is really important because ink likes to spread and blossom and go everywhere. And when it does, sometimes it doesn't want to go back away. You know, it tends to impregnate the fibers and be difficult to remove. So I'm going to make sure I have that ring around there to keep it from going so far on me. Let me get my gloves on because I'll start using product again. It's not just water now.
Yeah, we would have people saying, hey, what happened to the gloves?
Oh no, that's just water there. So
Well, you had to take them off, and that's real world.
I had to take them off to open it, but again, always make sure you put on fresh before you touch any product. I had water there, so I didn't, jump to put on the glove. But before I touch even a pipette with product in it, which can't really, you wouldn't think be able to get to my fingers or anything, I always err on the side of caution. So I'm going to get those gloves on. So if the pipette spits something at me or anything else, I'm not caught up in it. Now that's just split the glove. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so we surrounded it. We put that dam or that ring of water around it. Now, some chemical manufacturers tell you a specific product to do the ring with. If they tell you to do it with a specific product out of their kit, I recommend you follow the instructions. If they don't, water is probably going to be more than sufficient. Now here I've got a different ink remover because we tested it, and this one seemed to transfer much better. And I'm going to work from the outside in, just like I did every other time. and this one seems to be really dispersing
Mm-hmm.
that ink quickly. Now, sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes, however, that can be a bad thing. Because sometimes it just blossoms everywhere. Luckily, I put that dam around it because that looks like it might be a real fun one. Now here, I'll clean the tines off on the tool first. And again, agitate from the outside in. It's so important always to work from the outside in. That's one of the biggest fundamentals that people sometimes get in a hurry and neglect. And that's one of the fundamentals that very often rears its ugly head and makes it worse.
Tom,
So
I could see the need to keep the customer from watching this happen.
oh yes, look at that. I mean, we started with something that looked like that. And
Mhm.
even with ringing, look at how much that product made it spread.
Mrs.
This
Smith is looking up the phone number for her lawyer.
uh-huh. Well, Mrs. Smith,
Ah,
I
maybe
answer,
Mrs.
don't panic, Mrs. Smith. This is a process. Remember, this is a restoration. I'm removing pigment here that most cleaners would just say, Mrs. Smith, we have to do a bonded insert. That's never going to come out.
And even if it doesn't come out all the way, if it's acceptable, that's the important thing.
Well, it is, and again, with inks and some of the things like mustard and that, the really difficult spots and stains, you may end up addressing them a few times in between to get it out or to get 95%. You may never get 100. Remember, good not God. You may never get 100%, but you can get pretty close if you're consistent and persistent and you work at it methodically. So if you see here, I'm just still getting transfer. So I'm still blotting some out. So the chemical still has some of it solubilized. Well, I'll continue to do this until I'm not getting much transfer. Wow, I'm still getting quite a bit. And that's one of the problems with ink. I've had one ink spot ruin several spotting towels because it just keeps spreading and running. Now I'm not getting hardly any transfer, so I'm going to take that spotting towel out of the way. And you see it is now nowhere near as bad as it was. So I've got it really well looking better. Now I would do the same process, and I know this is really boring for those of you watching because I have to do it over and over, but not every stain. The Kool-Aid came out much easier than ink, as you saw. Some stains are just more difficult, require more time, more effort, and more energy. And of course, I know that ink is one of those, so immediately when I see ink, I don't think of 2 or 3 minutes like I do for most Kool-Aid stains, or a coffee stain or something like that. I think, oh, here we go. This one's going to be a good 20, 30 minutes. Because many times that's exactly what they are. Now, again, I reinforce that dam. I put the dam back around because you see how easily these inks spread. And then I'm going to agitate. Again, I removed a lot of the gross contamination. I'm down to minutia, so I'm going to be a little more specific in my agitation. I'm going to look for fibers that have darker colors, and I want to make sure the tines, the little pokey parts, the tines on these are actually hitting them and working them into the product. Sometimes I might say, wow, that worked really well, but I didn't quite put enough product on. I need to get a little wetter for it to happen to transfer. So here I saw right in the center here, it just didn't seem to be moving like it was everywhere else. So I'm just applying a small amount more. And then giving it that dwell time is always very important before you tamp it out. While that's sitting, I want to give that a minute or two of dwell time. While it's doing that, I'm going to go back to this one we did earlier and we left dwell time. It's still, I can still see blue.
Mm-hmm.
That's concerning. Let's see what happens when we do this. Well, I'm seeing blue transfer. As long as I continue to see transfer, I'm pretty happy. It's when I don't, now that's from the brush on the top of that. I have now blued 2 brushes.
Hmm.
So again, now I just take these out to the truck and plugged my, I got a pressure jet that I quick connect to the hose, and I just blow it off, and that'll take it right out because it's full of ink remover and ink. It usually comes right out, so you need to do that. You need to make sure you're not transferring it to another area. Now I'm getting no transfer left whatsoever. That is again significantly improved over this. Now this was the second or third treatment we did here, and boy, it looks way better.
It sure does.
But I would probably address that another time. Now, if after 2 or 3 times I'm not getting transfer, then I'm going to say that product just isn't going any further. Now, I've been using water-based ink removers, and it's done pretty well. I might say, because it's like this, that I might try a gel solvent. A lot of times that will work because it sits there and penetrates and works slowly at it. I might try one of the other solvents, like I might try the ink remover that seemed to make so much more release on the other spot. I'm going to take that ink remover and see what would happen if we use it on this. And this is where it takes a little practice and a little time to see. And what I'm looking for is to just see if it's going to break any more of that ink loose. Sometimes you're going to get to a point where there's nothing else you can do, and it's not going to be 100%. And that's never a wonderful moment, but
It's real.
it is real. And sometimes, good, not God, sometimes I just need to understand that if it's not working, I need to change my process. Now I got a whole lot of that out, looks way better. And it stopped transferring. Wasn't getting any transfer onto the towel at all. So I switched chemicals, and look, I'm getting no transfer again. So both ink removers are down to the point where I'm getting no transfer. So for me at this point, that may be the best result that I can get. As Mrs. Smith, we went from that to that. Or if I wanted to be even more diligent, I could then take a gel, whatever your favorite solvent gel is, and apply a gel. And many times with the gels, I'll let them sit 5, 10, 15 minutes because they are slower acting and penetrating than the liquids. And that being the case, when they're that slow acting, you just have to give them time. So a lot of people get in a hurry with spotting. You get in a hurry with a lot of things. If you're in a race, be in a hurry. But if you're doing spotting, sometimes you just need to slow down. Now here, I'm just taking a Q-tip and I'm just spreading it around a little bit on a few of the fibers. You notice I'm not even moving the fibers. I'm just moving the gel. Okay, I wanted to make sure I got gel evenly across some of those fibers. And I will let that sit for 5, 10, 15 minutes. And then I will scrape it off because we don't work gels and solvents into the backing of the carpet. Then I will scrape it up and see what happens, see if it was able to take on some of that ink. And many times, as you let this sit, the gel will actually take on the color of the product, what you're trying to remove. So many times that you'll actually see the gel starting to turn blue as it's breaking away the last vestiges of that ink from the fiber. But that's a little more time-consuming process, but it does work. And many times you can get that 95 to 100% removal like that. It's just being patient. So for me, it's all about planning my time. If I know it's ink and I know it's going to be difficult, I'm going to do this in sections. In the real world, I would go in and put a dam around it first, and then apply my ink remover. Give it 5 or 10 minutes of dwell time. I would go vacuum 2 rooms, then come back and do my blotting. Then I would, once it's blotted, it's dry, so it'll absorb the product again. I would reapply it, go vacuum the other 2 rooms, or go clean one of the rooms, then come back and blot. If you do it right, you don't have to apply 30 minutes of your time all at once to this discoloration, this ink spot. What you need to do is give it 30 minutes worth of time, but you might only spend 5 minutes actually touching and working on the carpet. The other 25 minutes is dwell time while you're doing something else and being productive and letting the product, the chemical, and that reactivity do its work in its time. So that's the biggest thing, is time management. A lot of people want to jump in and do it all right away. Some things do not respond well quickly, ink being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
If it's really well set, if they've tried a bunch of things, it's going to take longer. So instead of taking the spot and applying that red remover to it, I'm just going to put some red remover on it real quick, a reducing agent. And instead of being really fast and hitting it with steam right away, I might let this sit for 20, 30 minutes. And when I come back, it's actually completely disappeared. Or I might come back in 20, 30 minutes, and it might have only changed by 20 or 30%, and I need to readdress it. So that's why I do some of this, then I go and vacuum a room or two, come back. Do some of this, go back, clean a room, come back. That way I'm not wasting a lot of time. I'm not standing here for 5 or 10 minutes watching it while that dwell time is happening. It's a necessary thing, that dwell time, but I don't have to necessarily stand there and watch it. It doesn't require my participation at all. So I can put the product on and go do other things. And here now it looks like some of that gel is starting to pull some of the blue color into it. You're starting to see a little blue transfer. That's a good sign. So when you apply these products, remember, dwell time is your friend. We learn in school, whether you learn the acronym CAT, TAC, CHAD, whatever. 40 years ago, I had an instructor tell me chemical, heat, agitation, and dwell. Dwell is dwell time or time. Those acronyms are all the same. But he said, CHAD is your buddy. If you use the right chemistry, you understand the chemistry is the right chemical in the right proportions, the right dilution, you agitate it properly, you allow sufficient dwell time, okay, your process is going to be much easier, because those chemical, agitation, dwell, and heat, if you're using heat for acceleration or whatever, those 4 components are necessary. And CHAD, your buddy CHAD, those 4 principles will do most of the work for you if you allow it to do it. If you get in a big hurry and don't let CHAD do its work, don't allow dwell time, you don't agitate, you don't do whatever, you're going to have a lot less significant results, because you didn't employ CHAD and let him do the work. So those fundamentals are applicable in every aspect of cleaning, whether you're cleaning a couch, carpet, whether you're doing spot and stain removal, whether you're cleaning wall partitions at the local commercial place, doesn't matter. Making and doing these things consistently is going to make you a better spot and stain removal expert. You might only get 80% on some of them, you might get 95%, but in general, your percentages are going to leap much higher almost immediately, just by understanding, putting the dam around it so it doesn't spread, applying the product, agitating from the outside in. Every one of these principles is so basic. The problem is, even though we know them, we become complacent and we start shortcutting them and not doing what we should be doing consistently every time. And that's a big problem. So stop, take a deep breath, reevaluate what you're doing. If you're doing spot and stain removal, you're being unsuccessful, you might need to look at the chemistry you're using. You might want to try a few different products. I tried 2 different ink removers here, 2 different Kool-Aid removers, 2 different organic stain removers, and I've got 3 or 4 more. We could try more. I'm not afraid to try and find the one that I like best, or the one I get best response with. However, the one that I get the best response on this ink with today may not be the same as the black ink I'm going to run into tomorrow, which may respond totally differently. So again, that's one of the reasons I like to isolate and use Q-tips, and I probably should have started with that, but I'm so familiar with these samples because we do them all the time that I didn't. But anything that you're going to do, if I'm going to do a coffee stain, if I want to find out if that coffee stain is going to come out easily or more difficultly, okay, I just want to show you for like coffee and the organics, if you want to tell how the process is going to work, again, Q-tip, get it wet, take off most of it by pushing against the sides and rolling it your finger, isolate a few fibers. Now I'm going to isolate just that little area right there. See where it's sticking out from the regular shape? I'm going to just isolate that. and I'm going to use this Q-tip, and I'm only going to test it in a small area. Because if it doesn't work, I don't want to treat the whole area with that, because it didn't work and it's going to wet out the fiber, and then the other chemicals I'm using aren't going to be as effective. Now, just with that Q-tip, I was able to completely remove that little piece that stuck out. So I would say, yeah, hey, that's going to work really well. So once I've tested it, grab that pipette and go to town. But the Q-tip test sometimes can be very advantageous if you have something and you're not sure how it's going to respond to specific chemistry. If you don't know if it's an organic stain or synthetic stain, I'll isolate a few fibers and treat it with an oxidizer over here, and then put the oxidizer bottle here so I remember which side I did it on. And then I'll go over here and I'll isolate a few fibers and put the reducing bottle over on this side and try it on here. And then I'll wait and see which one responds to the chemistry, and then that'll tell me what to use overall. Okay? I'm gonna, hold on, I gotta put one more glove back, and I want to scrape that gel off and see how much ink removal we had. Again, it could take longer, but I want to see if we actually got any blue into that gel. If we don't get any blue into that gel at all, I'm going to pretty much call that a non-response and that we've got everything we're going to get out in this attempt. So,
All right.
and how I do that, I got a clean towel here so I can see what I scrape off. Then I use the scraping edge. My best friend likes to use a spoon to do this. And I scrape it off and put it on the white towel and see if I pull any color when I'm doing it. And I don't see hardly any color transfer whatsoever on that towel with the solvents. So we've tried 2 different water-based ink removers. It removed it down to that level. And then I tried a gel solvent. We're going to see if we can get any transfer from it at all. But I don't think we're going to get much. I got a little bit. Let's go to another clean spot. Make sure it's a clean spot on the towel. And I'm getting no transfer. So for me, in all honesty, I would say that little bit is not going to come out. So I got maybe an 85%. Boy, that's not a good one for a video, but it's real world, so I'm happy with it anyway.
This program, Tom, is called Unscripted, so it's real.
Yeah,
Real.
I started with that. I ended with that. It's way
Nice
better.
job.
When it dries, it'll be a little bit lighter. If I let it dry entirely, or got out my blow dryer and dried it only on air, don't turn on the heat because you will set that ink and it'll never come out. If you dry it and that, you could start all over with the process and see if you get any more of that out. But sometimes it just doesn't all come out 100%. And then it's a matter of how much effort you want to put into it and for what results you're after. You know, if that was an apartment, that would probably be acceptable. If that was a really expensive carpet and a high-end and a demanding customer, she may say that's not good enough. So then you're either drying it or going after it further. Remember, when you've gotten to this point where you're getting no transfer and everything, if the customer wants you to proceed beyond this level, which I'm comfortable with, I'm going to tell her that then I'm going into even more aggressive and restorative procedures. There's more nap distortion. There is more chance of color loss, etc. I'm going to note it on the invoice and make sure that she signs that she understands that going any further than this might be damaging. Right now, when that dries, that carpet's going to brush back up and look fine. There's no nap distortion. There's nothing, but there is still a tint of blue. But if I go further, the more aggressive I get and the more times I address it, the more likely it is to cause some degree of damage. And I just want the customer to be aware of that before I go to that degree, because I don't want to wait until I do that and then start explaining, oh, well, it's because I did that. Because even though it's the same fact, the reason it happens is because I had to get more aggressive. If I tell them before I do it, it's a fact, this is where we're at. We're starting from this point. This is the outcome I'm looking at. If I wait until I do it and mess something up and didn't tell them, no matter what I say, the same fact, we had to get more aggressive, et cetera, sounds like I'm making excuses for the damage to the carpet. So what you tell them beforehand is a fact. Afterwards, it sounds like the same exact words played off a tape recorder. It still sounds like an excuse because it's after the fact.
Exactly.
Don't lie to your customers ever.
Well, Tom, I'm impressed with what you did with the spot and stain demonstrations. I know the ink was a little tough, but that was real world. And I say on video, it looks really good. So, and customers aren't looking mostly at their carpet that close. So I think you did a fantastic job.
Well, I wasn't totally thrilled with it, but most of the time those come out on the samples. This one didn't. That is as real world as it gets. It's not always
Exactly.
100%. So I'm happy that everything else responded really well. Mrs. Smith, the Kool-Aid responded really well to the process. The coffee and the wine responded well. The ink, it responded favorably, but not perfectly. Come on, let's take a look and I'll show you what we've got.
Yeah.
And that's how I address it. That's why I never tell them it's going to come out or it's not. Let me address it and see how it responds, because it's the inanimate spot, not my skill or what I do. It's a process.
I think the big lesson here is you do your best, you be honest, and you explain the process. That's what I got from it.
Awesome.
Tom, all those samples were nylon, correct?
Yes.
Can you talk a couple minutes to wrap this up about the other fibers and how they might have been different in your demonstration?
Well, all of the fibers, had I used polyester or olefin, they all would have responded much more readily and much more favorably. That ink would have come out because it seemed to be primarily water-based. Water-based stains come out of olefin and polyester very readily. The only problem with olefin and polyester is the oil-based stains tend to bond and be more difficult to remove. But the Kool-Aid and the wine and a water-based ink and all those would have responded much more rapidly, almost to the point where you could not charge for them. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't charge, but at the same time, if Mrs. Smith is spending $400 or $500 and it's a polyester carpet and you're going to spray that stuff and come back in 5 minutes and it's going to be gone, you might include that in your process and in your price, because you don't have to charge extra. It's not an exorbitant, exhausting process. It's really, really easy. And that's the difference. And nylon, although there's still quite a bit of nylon commercially on the market, residentially, it's lost a lot of market share. We're seeing a lot more polyesters, and I've been testing some of the new polyesters, and it's just amazing how easily it comes out. I wish I could do the spotting class just on that, but it's not real world. Because the worst case scenario is nylon or wool. Now, I'm not going to mess up that much wool. It's too expensive, so I use nylon, and we see a lot more nylon out in the residentially than wool. Nylon has been predominant, big part of the market since the 60s. Wool is about 2% of wall-to-wall carpet in the United States. In other countries, it's higher, but here it's only 2%. So that's really not a good judge of what we're going to see in the field either. When you get to the polys, you use the same exact process that I did. The only difference is it's going to respond much more quickly and readily and be easier. So then you can adjust the price accordingly. If you know you're going to spend 10 minutes instead of 20 minutes and you charge $30 instead of $60, that's okay, because you're still going to get that response rate. And typically you don't end up with the vestiges like with the ink, where a little bit of blue just gets in those dye sites. Polyester and olefin don't have those dye sites, so you don't have that problem. So there you're going to see a much more high likelihood of 100% success.
Well, Tom, you are a true master of your craft. Thank you for this.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. Whenever you want, I'm happy to help.